All right, everyone, welcome to the Inclusion Cafe, episode number 1. And I am excited that you're listening and that you're joining. Today with us, we have for episode 1, the man, the myth, the legend, Ian Moses, global head of I&D at Allegis Global Solutions. Ian, welcome to the Inclusion Cafe.
Thank you, Joe. That's a wonderful introduction. I'm gonna
Did I set
keep
the
that
bar
one
high?
forever. Yeah, that's a good one, man. I'm gonna keep that one forever, man. So thank you for that.
Good, good. Well, again, thank you so much for being the very first guest on the show. Excited to have a conversation with you today about inclusion and diversity. There's going to be a theme to our discussion today, or at least I would like for there to be, and it's really about understanding and discussing the challenges that leaders face in corporate America around inclusion and diversity initiatives. But first, we want to get to know you. So if you could share a little bit about yourself, what you do in your position, and why a career in D&I or I&D.
Yeah. Yeah, well, good. Well, a little bit about me. I sit here in Dallas, Texas.
Yeah.
So the big country of Texas, as they say. And I work for an organization called Allegis Global Solutions as their head of inclusion and diversity globally. And so I get the privilege of working with thousands of employees to help drive inclusion and diversity throughout the fabric and the framework of our organization. And that ranges from working with our employee resource groups to working with our training development departments, our internal recruiting teams, as well as our leadership teams to just ensure that we, have an inclusive lens on everything. So we're very early in our journey. We still have tons of work to do. And I'm just learning to try to celebrate some of the wins and the progress that we've made so far. But it's been a long ride. On a personal note, I'm a father of 3. Love that part of my identity as being a parent. It is one of the most amazing things that I've had an opportunity to do, and I'm still learning on that journey as well.
Always.
Yeah, yeah. And then you asked about, me joining or getting into this DE&I space. I don't think I chose this space. I think this space chose me.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, I came from a human capital solutions recruitment, talent acquisition background, and organically, I was always involved in the community, whether it be through, doing career fairs or resume writing workshops, just donating my time with, community organizations. And so I had always been someone who because I identify as an underrepresented minority, always felt the need to support and give back. So definitely, when I looked at my recruiting network, it was highly diverse in nature. But I always just kind of had some sort of connection to the diverse community being relative to my background. As far as going down this journey of inclusion and diversity, I had an opportunity for a position come across my desk, and I was literally just being asked to see if I had a referral, right? Because I had knew so many people, and I was just really puzzled by this role of inclusion and diversity recruiter that it even existed. And so I learned and did some research and talked to a person that was doing the job and fell in love with the idea of I have an actual role that plays a part in creating equity, creating opportunity for these
Mm.
diverse communities, something that I have been doing organically, but this was something I was going to get paid to do. Unbelievable,
Yeah.
right? So that's kind of how I, shifted my career into this DE&I space, and I've just really just dove in ever since, and really tried to make it a part of, what I do for others, but just a part of way of life.
Well, Ian, thank you so much for sharing that. And I think a lot of people that know you, myself included, are probably really happy that opportunity came across your desk
Yeah.
because it's been an absolute joy. You and I work together at Allegis. For the listeners, Ian is actually one of my chief mentors in the field of DE and I. So again, thank you for everything you're doing. So let's jump into some of the questions.
Yeah.
So let's start. You've been doing this for a while. You worked for several companies doing this. So you've probably seen, I don't think in this field we can say we've seen it all, but you've
Yeah.
seen a lot, right? So what do you think are some of the top challenges that leaders, maybe at that director level or executive level, um, face when they want to create an inclusive environment? In other words, they've made the commitment, they've made the announcement, but now, okay, what challenges am I going to face? Could you talk us through some of those?
Yeah. So I'll say this, that, everyone is at a different place, right? And so, as you listen to this or you hear me talk about this, I don't want to put a blanket over all leaders, because I think some leaders are absolutely better than others and some leaders are very new to this space. But I, when I think about the challenges that leaders face, I would look at, three, probably a few areas, right? One of those being the ability to slow down and mitigate their own biases. This is an art. This is something that requires training. To be biased is to be human. And so we all have them. I don't care what your background, nationality, experience, your levels of where you operate within an organization, we all have bias, and that's okay. But the ability to slow down and mitigate that bias is an area or a challenge that I think a lot of leaders, individuals have, more
Mm,
so leaders, because they're responsible for so many things, right? And so we're moving so fast and we're wanting to get things checked off our list, trying to move on to the next one. And so we miss things. We have blind spots. And I think um, the more that leaders can learn how to mitigate their biases,
mm,
uh, the easier it becomes for them to create a more inclusive workforce. The second thing I would say that gets in the way would be that lack of visibility into the diverse talent, the differences that exist within organizations, or within your teams. Because sometimes you could have some of the greatest ideas that are a part of your organization or a part of your team, but because the environment isn't inclusive enough, that individual doesn't feel comfortable sharing those great ideas. So
wow.
we see that happening a ton, where individuals just come into work, do their job, go home. That's it, right? They don't feel psychological safety. They don't feel a level of authenticity where they can actually, really bring those ideas to the table. And then the last one I would say for leaders is being able to manage through differences.
Mm,
I say
mm,
that because that's hard.
yeah.
Managing and interacting with someone who's different, different opinions, different viewpoints, it can be uncomfortable, it can be awkward, and the natural human nature isn't to lean into those, things. So we want to, I don't want to go down that route, right? Especially if you don't have to. Well, if I don't have to, why go down that route?
Yeah.
So for leaders, being able to manage through differences, embrace the different views, thoughts,
Mm,
backgrounds of their employees can sometimes seem somewhat difficult. So I think the natural thing is to, identify people that are like you so that you don't have that discomfort. So those are some of the challenges, but like I said in the beginning, I don't want to put a blanket over everyone. I think different leaders are at different places, depending on their experiences, depending on things that they've done to help grow as leaders.
I think that's a phenomenal answer. One term I've started using a lot regarding unconscious bias is unconscious beliefs. I mean, because you're right, we all have them. It so when we hear the word bias, right? Sometimes there's that negative connotation, and a lot of us don't want to admit to that. And I
Mhm.
think leaders understanding that exactly what unconscious bias is and recognizing, yeah, that everybody in my company has this, even the people that we're working towards inclusion with. So I think that's an amazing answer. I loved how you kind of broke that out in three segments. Psychological safety is huge,
Yeah.
I think, for organizations as a whole, but even individual teams, right? Like if you think of your teams you've had in the past. One question I want to ask. I was in the military for a long time, um, and so psychological safety, team cohesion, stuff like that's really important. Uh, if you think through some of the three things you mentioned, what are a few things transactionally that the leaders could actually do to say, hey, we're going to work on overcoming these challenges by doing this.
Yeah, yeah, good question. So I'm going to take a different approach with this question.
Yeah,
You said you were in the military, right?
yeah,
You
yeah.
had a team, right? So when you were leading your team, what were some of the things that you did to ensure that your team felt included? What were some
Oh
of the things
wow, yeah, yeah, bringing it right back. Oh, I like that. Yeah, wow. Yeah, so I had 15 years in service. I led multiple teams, multiple personalities, um, and at multiple levels, right? From a junior leader on a team to a
Mhm,
very senior leader on a team, right?
mhm,
Um,
mhm.
and that level and that responsibility sometimes matters in how you manage and stuff like that. But when it comes to inclusion, when it comes to creating a team of belonging, some things I did um, was to ensure in the decision making processes, whether it was an inventory inspection, a prepping for a deployment, um, a providing maintenance, or excuse me, preventive maintenance on vehicles, whatever processes we use, whatever
Mhm.
we did as for our team, everybody's ideas on how we did that were included. And that's not always the case in the military. A lot of times it's the sergeant saying, we're going to do this by the book. In the military, they put you in a very uh, kind of confined box. But for me, I found the best way to lead was to include everyone's opinions, everyone's thoughts. If we did something on Monday that could have been done better the next Monday, I listened to that as a leader. I included that insight. Psychological safety is huge in any organization. I love that term. I heard
Mhm,
that term only probably about 7 or 8 months ago.
mhm.
Um, it, because it's the core and the fiber of a team, right?
Yeah,
People have to feel safe and comfortable on that team to not only be who they are, but to feel physically and emotionally and mentally safe.
yeah.
They have to know that if they call out something or they bring up something to improve on that following Monday, that
Mhm.
Sergeant Moats isn't going to um, retaliate or feel like you're trying to step on my toes because I'm the leader and you're trying to get everybody to do it this way. They have to feel safe enough to
That's right.
come and do that and make that change.
Yeah,
And I have heard stories, Ian, throughout my talks with other D&I professionals and HR professionals, um, and people going through this, of just terrifying things that have happened to them and them not feeling empowered enough to say something because there was no psychological safety on the team. And I would never think, uh, from my perspective, that things like that would still be going on in today, right? But to answer your
yeah,
question,
yeah.
that's absolutely some of the things that I did. When we're talking about psychological safety, anytime I would have a counseling session or a performance, what would equate to a performance session, I would ask them, hey, how do you feel about the team?
Yeah.
How do you feel? Do you feel like you can bring anything to the table at any time, no matter what it is? Do I create an environment on this team where you feel safe emotionally, physically, and mentally? Can you be you?
Yeah.
Because the military doesn't always do that,
Right.
right?
Right.
But when it's an individual team, you're getting ready to go pound sand in Iraq or Afghanistan. You want the most cohesive team you can find. I know that's a really long answer, but I hope
No,
it gave
no.
you.
Yeah, I mean, I think you answered the question, right? You talked about some things there about making sure everyone's voice was included. It's the same for organizations. When I talk about those three challenges, it's the same things for organizations, making sure that everyone's voice included,
Uh,
creating that safety, right, that you talked about so that people can feel comfortable sharing some of those great ideas. But it starts with the leader, right, making sure they put those egos that we sometimes have as leaders in check and say, listen, that's not what I want. I want an environment, or I want a team that everyone feels like they can contribute. So the same things that you did in the military, right, are some of the same things that leaders can do to deal with some of those challenges that I mentioned earlier.
mhm.
Unfortunately, like you said, the military isn't always that way. Guess what? Organizations aren't always that way. Why would it be any different? We're humans, we're people, right? And so until people can recognize where their gaps are, right, and what do they want to achieve, then those behaviors will, just continue to show up.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
what needs to happen? Education and awareness and training on how to help you work through those behaviors, to really help you, change the hearts and minds. But then there's also systems and processes that need to be put in place to help shift those behaviors if they continue to happen, to, I don't want to use the word penalize, but to, um, you know, at least adjust some of
Mm.
the things that continue to happen. So you said it best. It doesn't change, but there's different things that can be put in place to help organizations correct some of the challenges that leaders have. And then when the rubber meets the road, maybe it's time to find a new leader.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that it's amazing perspective and honest talk, right? I couldn't agree more. So let's shift a little bit, and kind of get our eyes around process and strategy. So I haven't been in the DE&I field nearly as long as someone like yourself or others, but every time I go to a new program or something, it always the initiative, the endeavor starts within talent acquisition, and I understand that, right? I understand that to a point, but there's so much more to consider, right? And I guess the question I'm trying to get at here is starting in talent acquisition always the best approach to start a DE&I initiative for a company, or are there other areas that they need to take into consideration and maybe start at, or are we really building the plane as we fly it here?
So people are building the plane as they fly it. So you're right. Talent acquisition is usually the starting point. Is that wrong? Not necessarily. I do agree that you need to have a focus on attracting a diverse workforce continuously. Like, this never stops. But there needs to be other things in place working simultaneously as your talent acquisition team is working to attract a more diverse workforce. It can't just be, that's what we're going to focus on first, and then we're going to move over here, and then we're going to
Yeah.
move over here. It
Yeah.
has to be a lot of simultaneous moving parts taking place all at the same time, that address not only the attraction piece of diverse talent, but the retention piece of that diversity, the engagement of that diverse population, the
Yeah.
development of that diverse population. So there needs to be a lot of moving parts taking place. This is change management, right, at its finest. And so you have to make sure that you're doing all the things to ensure that you have success or favorable outcomes. And just focusing in one area isn't going to give you successful or favorable outcomes. You wouldn't do that within your business models. You wouldn't do that within your marketing strategy. You wouldn't do that within your business development strategy. You would have
Mhm.
multiple ways that you look and approach solving for X. So it's the same, right? Talent acquisition, while it's a very important, very critical part of the strategy, just as equally retention, promotion, engagement play just as equal of a part of a strategy to ensuring that you are achieving diversity at all levels within your organization.
Mm. Yeah, again, I don't sound like a broken record. I couldn't agree more here. I like the way you started out saying that, it shouldn't be, okay, we're going to handle talent acquisition, and once we're done with that, we're going to move on. Because if you did that, you absolutely be waiting a long time, and there's no inclusion and belonging that's going to happen there, right?
Yeah.
We're going to hire some metrics around some new jobs, but that's about it. And that would take, that's time consuming. So I think the point, so it does. It sounds like we really are building the plane as we fly it,
Yeah.
but it doesn't mean that we don't get things accomplished,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah, and there's so many examples and frameworks and
yeah,
companies that can come in and help, establish, a process, a system, a structure. So it's not like, you got to come in from scratch.
yeah,
You can get some help, right? It's all about what you're willing to invest, right? If you
yeah,
invest in these things, you can have favorable outcomes. But if you're not willing to invest, you get what you pay for.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You mentioned framework, and that leads me great into my next question. I think you're a pro at this podcasting stuff and leading the questions here. What roles do ERGs and BRGs play in this whole thing? Right.
Yeah, yeah. If an ERG, BRG is established, set up, and has the right governance, they can be amazing avenues and vehicles for employees within an organization to have a sense of belonging, connectedness to the overall business. So
Mm,
I'm a big fan of employee slash business resource groups, but they have to be established and done right. A lot of times, employee resource groups are ran by who? People, right?
yeah,
And so, which is
yeah,
fair because that's where it should be. But there needs to be structure, once again, in anything that's going to be sustainable or successful. You can't just start it up and say, all right, go have it, do what you do. No, you need to put some governance in place around these employee resource groups. You need to put some structure and some plans and some budget and resources as far as communicating what these resource groups are able to do. And even within those committees, you need to provide development for those employees. You can't just
mm,
expect them to figure it out. I think they bring the employees that support and run our employee resource groups, they bring so much to it. But there
mm,
are things that they just don't know. And
yeah,
so it's important for a leader, whether that be their DE&I leader or their program leader of the employee resource groups, to understand and identify where their ERGs or the individuals who run their ERGs are doing well and what areas do they need help with. And so you can't just hope that an ERG is going to do well. You
yeah,
want to ensure that an ERG is going to do well. And those things take a strategic thought process, which, once again, those frameworks are out there. There are
yeah,
companies who go out there and put them in place for you. So if you don't have the know-how and you're starting from ground zero to be able to put that together, get some help. But if
yeah.
you do have it, make sure you invest in them because, once again, I hate to keep bringing this up. What you put time, what you put resources into, what you get out of it. If you don't, then expect nothing.
Yeah, Ian, you and I actually have had the opportunity to build ERGs together.
Yeah.
I actually worked directly for you in building one. And one of the things I thought was amazing that you had us do, those that were leading these ERGs, was put together a specific annual operating plan, right? An
Yes.
AOP. How
Yes.
beneficial do you think it is for companies to write these out and come together and adhere to these? I think that's what you were alluding to a little bit. Could you just talk just maybe a minute or so on that?
Yeah, yeah. The ALP is so big because it allows people to kind of see what are some of the major key events throughout the year that we want to make sure that we participate in. And
Mm,
then let's fill in the blanks, let's fill in the gaps. How often do we want to have a cadence of visibility or meetings? And so what usually gets put in calendar is usually the things that people are going to, kind of plan around.
mm,
If you don't have that plan mapped out throughout the year, it doesn't have to be perfect, but if you don't have that plan, we're constantly working to figure it out every month, and then we get behind, and guess what happens? Nothing.
mm. Yeah,
So I am a big fan of the annual operating plan. I learned it from a previous company that I was a part of. I think it's structure that you should implement into a lot of areas of your business, but definitely into your employee resource group.
absolutely. And thank you for sharing. I absolutely saw the success in those AOPs, and thank you for touching on that. I think that would be a great step for companies who are looking to put these ERGs together to write those plans out. Well, we are coming kind of close to time here, Ian.
Yeah.
There's one more question, and this is more of a selfish question than anything to do with leaders and companies. But I'm an
Yeah.
ally. I'm an advocate. I am a IMB professional, right? I do that for my career. But when it boils down to it, I'm an ally. I'm a white guy from Northeast Georgia. I sound like a white guy from Northeast Georgia. So anybody can identify pretty fast where I fit into this. So that being said, Inclusion Cafe is founded, you know, mostly to help organizations and things like that, but also to help. me improve my allyship and my advocacy in this space and things like that. So the question here is, how important is it for allies to build actionable frameworks around their allyship and advocacy? And what are some of the things they can do?
Yeah, yeah. So that's a tough one because once again, everyone is at an individual place. I still question whether or not you're 100% white man. You might have a little bit of mixture in there, right? That you don't know about. But
Maybe.
allyship, while it can be very structured, I also think that it's more it's beneficial when the allyship is coming from the person's good nature, that
Mm,
it's their desire to want to be a part of the change, be a part of the progress that needs to be made. I was watching a video of a young man, and I don't even know if he was a comedian or not, but he was talking about his experience of getting pulled over by a police officer and how
mm,
he was just dealing with that experience, and everything was cool, but there was this white woman recording the whole incident the entire time. And he was just in awe that she took the 20 minutes to sit there and record the incident.
yeah.
And nothing happened. Everything went fine, and he let the young man go. But the man put that post on social media and was just like, that's an ally. And it was so shocking to him. And you could tell
Wow.
genuinely he was just impressed and appreciative of this woman, taking the time to record something
Mm,
because she wanted to be there to support and make sure that nothing happened. So, at the end of the situation, she gives him a thumbs up and says, "Are you okay?" And he says, "I'm okay." But it blew him away that someone that didn't look like him was willing to do those things. And so I think doing something out of the goodness of your heart, and when you see wrong, you correct it, no matter who you are, whether or not you're a black person supporting someone who's Hispanic, or you're a Hispanic person someone supporting someone who's Asian. Wrong is wrong, and so
yeah.
allies
Wow.
just support, and make sure that we don't allow wrong to continue to rear its ugly head. And so that's the main thing about being an ally. You can put some programs together, but goodness of your heart, let's be good people.
Yeah. Yeah. Just do the right thing for the right reason.
That's
Right.
right.
It's
That's right.
and that's allyship in action. So, well, Ian, we are at a close for episode 1 of the Inclusion Cafe. Again, I can't tell you personally what this means to me, and professionally, I appreciate your insight. I typically reach out to you at least once every 2 weeks about something.
Yes,
Um,
you do.
so thank you, and thank you everyone for tuning in to this episode with Ian.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.